Hi, McCartney fans, and welcome to episode 123 of Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We are a Paul McCartney talk show mainly dealing with the solo career of Paul McCartney. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Tom Hagniati, and you may know me from my other show, Talk More Talk, a solo Beatles videocast. And I am joined by my partner in crime, my backwards traveler, Mr. Andy Nichols. Andy, what's going on?
Good afternoon, my friend, and another great episode here, and looking forward to this one. This was a second installment of a great interview, and we're going to have a great time talking with our friend here, Andy, today.
Yes. As you can see, we have the return of Antony Rotunno, the host of the excellent Lennon podcast, Glass Onion, on John Lennon. So, Antony, welcome back, and how you been?
Hello, fellas. Yeah, doing fine. I've got 3 podcasts now, in fact.
Wow.
Yes, we're going to talk about that movie one. You got a movie one now?
That's right.
Yeah, that's kind of the third one. That's a monthly one, but
Okay.
obviously I still have Glass Onion. I'm kind of reaching the point where I'm repeating myself a lot, and I've still got lots of episodes in the can. I've had some good ones recently, but I started a third podcast, which is called Life and Life Only, which is about life, the big joke being that I'll never run out of material. It's kind of, yeah, it's I don't know, a search for truth. It's got a lot of psychology in it, but it's also to do with alternative media as well. So
Gotcha. Cool. Well, we'll make sure we put the links for that when we post this episode. And how did that start?
I mean, I was involved with what I call alternative media, let's call it. I've appeared on other people's podcasts,
Right.
and I mean, joking aside, there is there's no shortage of material, because I find with the John Lennon one, I mean, I am reaching a point where I don't know how much longer that'll go. And to be honest, my opinion of John Lennon's going down more and more the more I do the podcast. So
No.
You mentioned that yesterday in our little chat. The more I do this, does my opinion get less and less? And is
yeah,
that
and just to say, it's not to do with this sort of social media thing that's casting in as only a wife beater, or all the stuff with Julian and everything. It's not because of that. It's just, I don't know, as we'll see today, it's just, I think I was saying to you before, the contradictions, they're quite charming up to a point, but then they get quite maddening at the same time. And weirdly enough, I haven't really reviewed that many of his albums. It's weird. I mean,
Really?
we haven't done.
I've noticed that you really don't just do shows just on the albums, really.
No, I mean, we haven't done Mind Games, we haven't done Walls and Bridges. So, I mean, in theory, there's lots of material. It's just whether my enthusiasm will hold, because it's no, just because you're limited, really.
Well, I think your podcast is good because there's so many out there that just analyze the albums. Yours is a little bit of a different take. You're kind of looking into the kind of who he is as a person and why he was so complex and his issues. So, yours. I mean, I know you might think you're being running out of material, but it's different because nobody else has really tackled that aspect of into the why, into who he was as a person and why he went through all these kind of changes and stuff, and why he was so contradictory, as you point out, throughout a lot of his life, as we're going to talk about. But not the albums. You not doing the albums, I think, is actually refreshing, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, the way I've kind of kept it going is really just branching out. So, I mean, we did with this big 3-parter that was about John Lennon and Elvis, with Ghosty, my friend Ghosty.
Ghosting, yeah.
And it ended up really being about 75% Elvis. So it's kind of going that way. Like John Lennon's becoming a slightly peripheral figure on some of the episodes, but we'll see. But I really want this Life and Life Only to take over, because I'm quite passionate about media and psychology and things like that, and
Gotcha.
it gives me this amazingly wide palette. So I think I'll take over in the next few months. And the film one's fine. I mean, it's monthly, and we've done what did we do? We did It's a Wonderful Life at Christmas. We did Marathon Man, and we just done The Social Network, and we're reviewing The Wall, actually, the Pink Floyd film.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah.
We're doing that next month, so that'll be fun. So yeah.
Well, I think with the Lennon stuff, as if you've pretty much uncovered every stone and you've analyzed every bit of information that you can, and you put it to bed for a while, if in, I don't know, 5 or 10 years time, something gets discovered, that's worth reviewing, then you review it, which is bound to happen, as time goes on. History, we'll find out something sooner or later, to uncover. But at the moment, it is what it is.
Yeah, the plot's still thickening, isn't it? For sure.
Oh, yes.
Sure.
It is surprising. 50 years on, 40 years on, we're still discovering, new things.
But this Coleman or Goldman thing that we talked about last time, it's just becoming, it's becoming almost like the show's gimmick. But I don't mean it like that. Like I didn't plan to become like the Coleman or Goldman guy. It's not that, but it just keeps coming up, and it's just fascinating. And I just had Aaron Torkelson-Weber on the show.
Mm.
Wrote the book Beatles and the Historians, and it hasn't gone out yet because I'm still working through my backlog. But really fascinating discussion, because she can tell you what methodological errors Coleman and Goldman made, for example, rather than going on like gut feeling, because I have a gut feeling about it. I'm sure we all do one way or another, but she can give you actually a historiographical. I always struggle with that word. Historiographical.
There you go.
Well, let's move along a little bit, because last time Andy and I we did our show, we talked briefly about this new Plastic Ono band box set, and I just wanted to try to just get get a sense how you feel about these box sets. Do you get excited about them as Andy and I do on the McCartney side and on the John side? Because I love these box sets. Especially the contact. The books are really good, and just the isolated vocals that we've been getting from John have been really cool from this camp. So what's your take on these box sets?
Well, if I can answer with characteristic honesty, I'm probably less excited about them than. In fact, I think I'm unique among Beatles podcasts, because I'm looking at your amazing collections there in the background, and this probably sums up my collection. Yeah, that's it. No, I am a collector to some extent, but I think I'm excited. I think I'd quite like to read the book, but I think that's the kind of band. I wonder how many different takes you can get out of that. I did actually listen to the podcast Producing the Beatles.
Yep.
They just did a show about Love. I don't know if you heard that. They talked about the evolution of it, and you heard Phil Spector doing a piano part, and then suddenly you hear that the piano part that we know, where Phil Spector's playing the melody, and it's magical to see. I like to see the process, but I just wonder how many more ultimate mixes you can have of all these things. So I'm a bit cynical about it to that regard, but I must say sometimes sometimes these new mixes, they do improve stuff. And when the White Album one came out, which was 3 years ago, that, to be honest, that pushed the White Album firmly as number one of my Beatles albums. So
really, wow,
just about, because I'm contradicting myself a bit there. So
you've been studying Lennon too much. That's why.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, too much.
Starting to rub off on you.
Yeah, that's it. But no, John Lennon, I think there's certain key years in John Lennon's songwriting. In 1968 was definitely one of them.
Right.
In 70, 71. But I think, as we'll see here, I don't know. I like, we'll get to some time in New York City in a bit. I actually think a lot more of it than most people. But anyway, yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, cool. All right, well, let's, as we said earlier, this is part 2 of our look at Lennon-McCartney throughout the 70s, their friendship, their interactions, through the press or through songs. And we ended with the Imagine album, with part 1. We did briefly talk about the Melody Maker, just a couple of minutes, but we are for a minute, but we didn't really get to Lennon's retort really. But we're going to start with Lennon in October of 71, right? Is that the date?
Yeah, it's just literally one line. He did an interview with Melody Maker, and he says, in America we're treated like artists. In England, I'm the lad who met Paul, got a lucky break, and won the pools. So he's obviously got this lucky break thing on his mind from Ram, right? But as we'll see, I think he was, I don't know. He just sounds like highly traumatized in all these interviews. He's just
Right.
out, and I don't know who said in England that he was the lad who met Paul and had a lucky break. I don't know how he got.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know where he got that wrapped up in his head.
I don't know. Who knows? But I think he was big on this thing about being an artist, and I think really he said in America we're treated like artists. You got to remember that he just moved to America, so he was very jaded by living in England. So it was
he was very down on England as a whole by that point.
The new horizon, and I mean we do have a terrible press. I've got to be honest, especially our tabloids. We're about one of the worst in the world, I'd say. So I can stand up to a point where you'd want to get out of there, but yeah. But I think he was promoting Grapefruit at that time.
Does that still hold true, you think, about how Lennon and the Beatles are looked at in your area?
Oh, I mean, I just meant as a general comment, our tabloids are just terrible in general in terms of being very harsh. No, I think in England there's a bit more. I think culturally, just to totally generalize, there's a bit more, slightly more indifference, or. I think there was a point. I was surprised by how badly the anthology did. From listening to another podcast, they were talking about the anthology, how much, in fact, there was a lot of buzz at the beginning in England, but then it kind of tailed off very quickly.
Yeah.
I think who knows, but I think the press were pretty rough on him, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, as I recall, the BBC wouldn't even allow Real Love to be played on their playlist at the time. They wouldn't even allow it.
Yeah, it was a weird anticlimax, wasn't it? Yeah. I've come to really like Free as a Bird more than Real Love, actually.
Oh, hands down. Agreed.
But I think at the time, just before they left England, he did the Parkinson interview as well, the Michael Parkinson one that appeared online after we'd never seen it for 40 years. Now it's gone again. So you've got to catch these things when they appear online. But yeah, he was definitely excited to be in America. So he probably had a bit of a rose-tinted glasses on there for a while.
Probably was the last interview he gave while on British soil was that one with Parky, I would think.
Yeah, do you remember I don't know what month that was.
It was right around. It was the date that they did that grapefruit signing in. You've seen the footage when they're at, I think they're in Mayfair or somewhere, and they're doing the grapefruit signing. Yeah.
T-shirt.
And they went from there and did Parky, and then I think they left shortly after that.
Yeah, it must have been just before. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, continuing with Melody Maker, then we move to November of '71, and we get Paul and Melody Maker with the headline in the Paul segment stating "Why Lennon is Uncool." Which, if you're going to get Lennon's attention, I'm sure that would do it. But we had briefly mentioned, things that he had said in this, how do you sleep? I think it's silly. So what if I live with straights? I like straights, I have straight babies. That doesn't affect him. He says the only thing I did was yesterday. He knows that's wrong. So things like that we had mentioned. And then, but the couple other things too that he said that we didn't really talk about was, John wanted to do a big thing in Toronto, but it didn't go all that well. He talks about how John got sick beforehand. And then here's the quote where it says, "John and Yoko are not cool in what they are doing. I saw them on television the other night and thought that they are saying about what they wanted to do together was basically the same as what Linda and I want to do." Not really, out there to cut his throat or anything, but he's still talking about John, kind of negatively, but kind of positively, kind of positive in the same way. I like what they're doing, but I don't like how they're doing it, stuff like that. So, it is kind of interesting.
Yeah. He's a lot more, I think I said on the last show we did, he's a lot more candid than we seem. Nowadays he's got this, he's got this reputation for telling all these stories, But he was very candid. Is this the one where I don't know, the interviewer said he was too candid or something? I was reading. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In the description above. Right. But
he says, "I wish we could just sign a paper and divide it 4 ways."
Yeah.
But
very naive thought there.
Yeah, but maybe he's just saying, "I wish we could." Maybe.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see, like, when he writes these, when Lennon's reply, he's so quick to reply, to jot off a reply, you know, and he just dissects it line by line by line by line, you know, throughout the whole, even as much as tackling, you know, criticizing him about, you know, overhyping the Let It Be album, and, you know, really in depth. It's just, he just goes blow by blow.
Yeah, they call it triggering now, don't they?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Triggered. But there was some other stuff. What was the other thing he said? Yeah, this was really interesting about Klein. I've made the mistake of trying to advise them against him, and it pissed them off. I think they might secretly feel I'm right, though.
And that was then, right?
That was 71, yeah.
Right. Which, as we'll see throughout, as we go through here, that's going to prove itself out. It's just, it's funny. He thought that even back then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's weird. And then he said, this is not related to John Lennon, but he said, my best playing days were at the Cavern. Lunchtime sessions, we'd go on stage with a cheese roll and a cigarette. And if the amps fused, we'd stop and play a Sunblessed commercial. I think Sunblessed is bread.
Okay.
That was a nice reminiscence, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I really enjoyed this Melody Maker a bit, you know, even though he had a few responses to John, I don't really consider these attacks. Would you, John?
I think he would take them as attacks, but
John would.
Yeah. I think he's just being forthright, really. Like I said, it's quite refreshing honesty. I think, like I said, when Erin Torkelson Weber was on my show, we were talking about all the, she talks about the different narratives.
Right.
And the way that I think post 1980, not only was John kind of canonized, but Paul was cast as this PR man. And I think as Erin and I talked about, and we'll talk about today, John was a hell of a good PR man, because he had loads of good lines and he was very charismatic and just changing his mind all the time, but sort of getting away with it because he's always got a quip for the camera,
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, there's so then so later on, Lennon saw it. Obviously, he wrote a letter, and and there's pretty much the equal amount of space between his and Paul, which was pretty funny.
I mean, it's like you're talking about the reply. The reply. Right, I mean, thanks for your letter. 1, we give you money for your bits of Apple. we give you more money in the form of royalties, which legally belong to Apple. I know we're Apple, but on the other hand, we're not. Parentheses.
Yeah.
And no matter how scathing the letter, he always starts with thanks, and he always ends with like lots of love and stuff.
Yeah. Like opens it up nicely. Vitriol throughout, and then he's like, love and peace to you all, John and Yoko. Yeah, but it's amazing to look. I know, maybe there's an answer somewhere, but for these millionth time in the past few years, I repeat, what about the tax? Right. We all just can't sign. Damn well we all just can't sign a bit of paper.
Right. One bit I found was interesting, as I've said before. Have you ever thought that the possibility that you could be wrong about the guy, meaning Klein, which is, I thought was pretty interesting. And then, he goes on and saying that, good God, you must know that we're right about Eastman, meaning the three, as, not wanting him, to manage the Beatles, so even then, Lennon's still sticking up for Klein, he's still.
Yes, very much. Yeah.
And again, contradicts that later when we get to 1973. But anyway.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and this thing about hype. I mean, I don't know. You could argue about what's hype and what's promotion. Because he says something about we've been hyping Beatles albums since Tony Barrow.
Tony Barrow wrote the notes for the early Beatle albums. But
what do you call hype? I mean, everybody hypes their album in terms of.
Right, because Paul was mentioning about the new phase on the Let It, that's how Let It Be was hyped. Well,
he just hated it because Klein and Spector had their hands all over it, and Paul didn't. Right. So it wasn't like a traditional Beatle album, which hype, as Antony says, would be applied to any Beatles album. Anyway, that one is a sore subject because Klein and Phil had their hands all over it, and Paul just didn't want anything to do with it. That's why.
Right.
Is this the one where he says, I bet you'll be living in New York by 70?
Yes,
exactly. Yeah.
2 years to catch up or something. Something along those lines.
What does he mean by that? It takes you 2 years is the usual time it takes you, right? Well, I wonder what's he inferring to there.
Who knows? I mean, I just had a guy on the show talking about the counterculture of the 60s. And I think, yes, many years from now did come across as a bit of a, setting the record straight. But I think John followed him there, and I don't always go for this.
And there's also something else that I noticed too, in a couple of things. This one, and then in that letter that went up for auction too, was he goes, the bit that really puzzled us was asking to meet without Linda and Yoko. I thought you'd have understood by now that I'm John and Yoko. So he's still, very much making sure that Yoko gets included, in everything, in every aspect of John Lennon. It's John and Yoko. But, and then PPS, even your own lawyers know you just can't sign a bit of paper.
And then there's also, imagine his working class hero with sugar on top for conservatives like yourself.
That's right.
Your politics are very similar to Mary Whitehouse. Now, do either of you guys know who Mary Whitehouse is?
No,
I don't.
No.
She was a campaigner. I think she was already a middle-aged lady by the 60s, and she was against the permissive society. So you'd always see her on television going, I saw a program last night that was absolutely disgusting.
Oh, okay.
Very conservative. So that's quite a dig, actually, comparing Paul to Mary Whitehouse.
Okay, gotcha. So that would kind of be like a blow below the belt then, huh?
Yeah, very much. I mean, he's casting Paul as this sort of square conservative,
right?
But in the sense, again, I'm really I'm talking my way out of being a fan of John Lennon here, but maybe I'm a bit jaded. I've been doing the podcast too long. But he's casting himself as this kind of working class, edgy guy, but in a very teenage sense.
And I have to come back to the fact that the working class image that he promoted is such crap because he came from the best posh part of Liverpool compared to all three of them. I mean, come on, semi-detached in Woolton, and the other three were like destitute and lived in crap compared to him. So like that image that gets pushed as the working class hero, if you don't know and you haven't been there, you just think it's, he's just a poor guy from Liverpool. BS to that. He was well off and he was taken care of very well by his aunt and his uncle. And that myth is it just drives me crazy.
Yeah. But he did an interview with Red Mole in 71 where he did talk about working class hero, that in a sense he's talking to the working class, but then he said, if you want to be a hero, just follow me. Right. So he's very much casting him. So it's almost like saying How Do You Sleep's not really about Paul. I mean,
right. That's all the stuff he did with Tariq Ali and all that, right?
Yeah, and Robin Blackburn. Yeah, I've just been reading that book I was showing you earlier. Had the Red Mole interview in full. So he's kind of he does this a lot. He will do something very blatant and then claim that it's sort of metaphorical or roundabout, but you can't really get away with it.
And as back to your other point about criticizing Paul as being conservative. I mean, it's not widely known, and it's only hypothesis, but Lennon was pretty much, after his whole, fight to stay in the USA, he became very, very, very quiet. And a lot of people would say he became very traditional and conservative, the last few years of his life, so very interesting to just see those parallels, come around.
Yeah, and I suppose things like conservatives depends whether you're talking small c or large c.
Yeah, I don't, but it's just 1970. Well, this time we're talking December 71. It's just in a matter of 5 or 6 years to see how things change is very interesting because he quickly conformed to, obviously he wanted to fight to stay in America, so he did that. And he took his medicine, he took his lumps with sometime in New York City and the Lost Weekend and all that, but then just quickly conformed to live a very quiet life the last 5 years of his life.
Yeah. And I think he just settled down a bit. I mean, we can argue about 1980, was he really settled? But you know what I mean? He was settled.
Right.
Settled in the sense of, he wanted to be in the Dakota, I think. But at this time, he's just very transient. He doesn't really have any roots. He's just moved to America, whereas Paul's already had a couple of kids, I guess, by now, and he's adopted Heather, so he's very much a family man.
Family man, yeah.
So I think John comes across as sort of someone who hasn't quite found his roots, really.
Right. So we move to that, and then we go to December of 71 with the release of Wings of Wildlife, the first Wings album. which features the song Dear Friend, which, and a lot of people, when you look at the timeline of it, it's released after Imagine, obviously How Do You Sleep's on Imagine. So you see Dear Friend, and, a lot of people are assuming that this is his response to How Do You Sleep? When in reality, when you do more research on it, it's actually a response to John's Rolling Stone interview, in a way. So, which I found to be pretty interesting. So, I mean, if that's the case, then why didn't you include it on, on RAM? You know what I mean? Because it was recorded during the RAM sessions. It was written, so, and it's kind of interesting, if you feel that way, why didn't you include it then, and why did you wait? So, I mean, it's just, things that I'm just still trying to find out, research wise. Yeah. But very interesting. I mean, it's not really heavy in the lyrics department. It's like 2 sentences really. With the other one, the second verse. Dear friend, throw the wine. I'm in love with a friend of mine, really truly young and newlywed. And the line that I question is, are you a fool or is it true? It's the one time where you really see Paul, calling John a name, really, it doesn't really, sink down to that level. But and then finishes is, are you afraid or is it true? What is true? Why is he a fool? So, I mean, lyrically, it doesn't really make sense to me.
And it's funny. It's funny, for as much as John, I mean, to cut you off there, as much as John dissected Ram line by line to see what was directed at him, Wildlife drops out pretty much without a sight and without a peep from Lennon regarding this song. You can't find anything from Lennon on this song. So, Ram, he basically goes through every line of the entire record and thinking it's about him. Dear Friend comes out, which obviously, if you're looking at it, you're going to put 2 and 2 together. But we don't hear anything from Lennon on this track, to my knowledge.
No, that I've seen, no.
As regards to the lyrics, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't really make sense. Are you afraid, or is it true? Are you a fool, or is it true?
And it's just too damn long, anyway, of a song.
Yeah, it's over 6 minutes, and you only got two verses, really. And then it just repeats them.
Lots of instrumental passages, but I do like the vocal. I wrote down plaintive and heartfelt.
Yeah, obviously, very, very heartfelt. But
nice. We just shortened it a little bit, and I like the "I'm in love with a friend of mine" because he said, he always said Linda was my best friend, and he's like, she's my mate as well as my wife. And,
Right.
There's that play on it as well too.
So when did you say that was recorded? That was recorded before Imagine came out.
Recorded during the RAM sessions.
So what month? Or
like
late 70, early 71.
Oh right.
Yeah,
so,
Ram drops in May 71. So end of 70, early 71.
So after the Rolling Stone interview would have come out.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So interesting, but still kind of weird. But December of 71, John and Paul meet in New York, and then they sort out business difficulties. Whatever that means. Whether Apple. What are their difficulties? What are they trying to sort out? It's not really known. I don't think these meetings are really described with what happened during these meetings. They're just there, and then they met. That's all you really hear. You don't really hear any specifics of these meetings.
Yeah, we're not really sure of a source on that either. We're just we're going by where Tom and I are using Keith Badman's book as our guide, really. The day by day, so he's got in his entry for December, it just says at the end of the month that they met in New York. You'd like to see an accreditation of some sorts attributed to that, but there's not listed, so you don't really, like to think that it's true, but it's so much time has passed, we don't really know, if it's accurate or not.
Is that 4 of them? Was it Yoko and Linda there as well? Is that right?
This just says John and Paul.
I think I saw somewhere it was Yoko and Linda, but
there'll be another one coming in January. Yeah, the one in January 72 was the 4 of them.
Right, that was just
in a couple minutes.
Okay, another dinner, right?
Right.
Yes. And then so in 71, John had to have received a letter that really pissed him off because he writes this letter to McCartney. It pops up in 2016 for an auction, and this is where you really see kind of a sense where how nasty I think Lennon can get, from time to time. Excuse me. But we don't know if it was Linda that wrote him the letter. We don't know if Paul was the one that wrote him the letter. But I'm thinking it was Linda, because he kind of mentions what the hell it's Linda here. I was reading your letter and wondering what middle-aged cranky Beatle fan wrote it. I resisted looking at the last page to find out. I kept thinking, who is it? Queenie, Stewart's mother, Clive Epstein's wife, Alan Williams. What the hell? It's Linda. So Linda must have, reached out to John.
But is that letter published or public?
Not the one that Linda wrote. See, and that's the thing. All we have
is John's reply.
John's reply letter, right? That went up for auction, and and there's some bits in here that you really think the press are beneath me, you. Do you think that? Who do you think you are? The self-indulgent doesn't realize who he's hurting a bit. I hope you realize what shit you and the rest of my kind unselfish friends laid on Yoko and me since we've been together. So it's just on a lot of him rambling on. My gist is reading this letter is I think Linda is trying to reach out to John saying, go easy on Paul.
Knock off.
Knock off. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's the least you can do first, noble people, Linda. If you don't care what I say, shut up, let Paul write or whatever. so then that right there alone, you think, okay, Linda had to have been the one that wrote John this letter,
To him only, like he mentions that. But then he says something weird about, your reaction was very subtle, a middle-class reaction. He's like, what does that mean?
Right.
What does that mean, a middle-class reaction? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, he's attacking middle-class, conservative, or he just loves painting the McCartneys in this upper echelon, conservative, middle-class status, and he's like this revolutionary, flag carrier. Meanwhile, they're both in the same playing field. They're both pop stars making oodles of money. Okay, maybe obviously it was an Apple mess at this time, but
sort of theoretical money at the moment.
Right, but I mean, the fact that John was wearing this flag is like, I'm this staunch fighter for the people, power to the people, red mole, all this, and Paul and Linda are just these, carefree, straight people. It just, to your point, very hypocritical.
Right. Another bit here. Finally, about not telling anyone that I left the Beatles. Paul and Klein both spent the day persuading me it was better not to say anything. He said that a couple times, but he has also reversed it by saying, well, maybe not Paul in another interviews when he has said that, it was Klein that convinced, John not to say anything about the Beatles breakup. But then he'll say Paul too from time to time, but then he'll retract and go back and say, well, maybe it wasn't Paul, which is, interesting when you see it in this letter as well. Because I've always read it that it was Klein that persuaded John not to tell anybody about the him leaving the Beatles.
That's what he said to Andy Peebles,
Right.
It was Alan, yeah.
And then again, in spite of it all, love to you both from us too. P.S. about addressing your letter just to me, still, So interesting. Again, how they're reacting.
Is there a date on that letter that he wrote back to her?
There was no date. It was just addressed to Linda and Paul. It's on the Bag Productions letterhead, and
with the Ascot postcode. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought it was back in the 71. I read somewhere.
Yeah, it's they're estimating. They're saying it's 71 in this letter, but again, no date on the letter. So
I'd love to see the letter that Linda wrote one day.
Oh, absolutely. And I meant to ask you guys if you guys had the Lennon Letters book, and I was kind of curious that if it could have been in that, but.
From memory, most of the letters in there are quite positive, aren't they?
There's nothing. A lot of this. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good book. I mean, it's great to see these letters, because it's quite unique. But it's it's more the humor, really. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing
So
really.
then,
Yeah.
so 71 ends, and then you kind of see a total dip on, nasty exchanges in the media. And why is that? Well, January 72, Paul, Linda, John, and Yoko, they meet for dinner, and apparently they agree to stop slagging each other off in the papers. So,
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder how they got on. How do you think Yoko and Linda got on in general? We don't really know much about that, do we?
I don't think they did.
I think they got on.
I mean,
Yeah.
in pictures that they're in, they seem friendly. You look at that last photo shoot and you see them all together in a couple shots, or you see Paul, Linda, John, and Yoko together in a couple shots, and they seem friendly. I don't see what they would have in common, you know what I mean, except for art. Linda's a photographer, and we know Yoko's being the artist as well. But I mean, I don't see why they would be nasty towards each other, really.
Well, I was listening to the Nagra Reels last year. As I told you, I got to about 6 days before the end. I listened to the whole lot, and it was amazing. I loved it. They famously had this meeting. Well, you don't hear the meeting, but you hear the aftermath.
Okay.
And Neil Aspinall, for example, has been very, very candid about Yoko, and Linda said perhaps I shouldn't have been at that meeting, and she doesn't say anything nasty. She just makes a comment that anyone would make, really. She tends to speak for him, kind of thing. Tends to speak for John, so I don't know.
Right.
Been a fly on the wall at that dinner. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
It's funny, Tom. Anthony mentioned the Lennon Letters book. So the Lennon Letters book has a chapter in it, chapter 13, Problems with Paul.
I haven't read it for years, to be honest. But
so they don't even know in here the letter that we're talking about. They're not even sure of the exact date either. It says letter number 142 to Linda and Paul, 1971 ? So they're not even sure when it actually was written. And that's in this book here. So
they do print it, right?
Yeah, they did reprint they reprinted the letter in the book. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't read that book for years, but it's a good one.
Yeah.
I'm kicking myself in the ass for not picking that one up. I need to go back and find it.
Yeah.
They're all very expensive online now. Have you noticed that?
2013.
I found it used before for $30. The original asking price. For the hardcover, anyways. So yeah, I do think it's out of print.
Is it really? That's like incredible. It's only 2013 it was published. Little Brown. Oh, Little Brown published it too.
Right.
I just wish that original Linda letter would surface.
Let's move on to February 72. We get the first Wings single, Give Ireland Back to the Irish. And then in June of 72, we get Sunday, Bloody Sunday from sometime in New York City album. Both concentrating on the same event, the Bloody Sunday. You talk about that for a minute, Anthony?
Yeah, the Bloody Sunday was January the 30th, and it was basically the British soldiers opened fire on some civilians, shot 26 civilians. It was a march against internment without trial, which was something that was going on at that time in England. They were able to keep prisoners for a certain amount of time without charging them, even without trial. So yeah, I'm curious to see. I don't know whether John and Paul. We don't know when this dinner was. I mean, if it was January 72, then most likely it wasn't after the 30th. So I don't know if it's a coincidence that they both wrote songs. I don't know. I mean, they tended to mirror each other's lives if you look at it.
A little bit, yeah.
They got married at the same time. There's a weird coincidence that Yoko and Linda both had children born in 1963. And have both lived in Scarsdale. Actually, they didn't both go to Sarah Lawrence. That's something that one of my listeners pulled me up on. Yeah, but
they did or did not go to both Sarah Lawrence.
They did. No, I had said that they did because I read out a load of Beatles coincidences on one of my shows. And
okay.
Pick me up on that.
Interesting, but different approaches. The songs are different. I mean, John's I think is a little more funky with the horns and and the arrangement. Paul's is more of a straightforward rocker. Funny with Paul's, after he's starting with the chorus, then when he gets to the verse, what does he do? He praises Great Britain first. He says, Great Britain, you are tremendous. You know what I mean? And then he goes in, and then, which I've always found fascinating, is like, if you're protesting, the situation, why would you just start off with, praising Great Britain to begin with?
This is a bit of a mess, to be honest. I just think lyrically this is pretty awful, and it doesn't really have any bite. Funnily enough, we know that his next single was Mary Had a Little Lamb, right?
Yeah, after this one was banned.
Different. Give I Mary had the beat is actually somewhat similar.
Right.
But I was listening to this last night, and I think I actually have a lot more regard for Sometime in New York City than most people. It might be slightly contextual, because the only time I was ever in New York, I bought it. This is years ago.
Okay.
And we were staying with friends, and I put it on, and we listened to it really loud, and we kind of danced the night away. And I think I really like Sunday Bloody Sunday because it starts with the marching,
Right.
sound like marching. And I mean, at least he mentions internment, and he mentions the lyrics are somewhat more relevant. So
Right.
but it's interesting that they both wrote these at the same time. It seems hard to think that that'd be a total coincidence. I wonder if they mentioned it to each other.
And it's funny too, likely, we don't know this for a fact, but they both likely were together the day that Bloody Sunday happened, with the dinner. I mean, it says the 29th, they flew to New York, and then the 30th, Paul was interviewed during his stay in the city about, the shootings. So if John and Paul were together that day, at some point, their paths crossed.
I think the dinner may have been on the 30th, possibly.
Right.
Possibly. Yeah, possibly.
The dinner could have been on the 30th, which is when that happened, which if that is true, that's extraordinary, coincidentally happening.
Of course, America's behind England, so it would have already happened.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Paul's is a really quick recording. We recorded it on February 1st, I think it was, and it's released on the 25th. Kind of, same as, maybe Instant Karma, if you will, with being, really quick, recorded and then, mixed and then dropped, whatever. But yeah, like you said, I think John's is a little more thought out, if you will. I think, lyrically, I there's some bits I really like on, keep Ireland for the Irish, put the English back to sea, leave Ireland to the Irish, not London or for Rome. It's bits like that, I think are pretty good. And there, there's other lyrics in there too that, talk more about the event, more so than Paul's. Paul's is more like a, think about it. What if this was you, type of angle, on it. How would you react? You know what I mean? If this happened to you or your family, would you just lie down and take it? You know what I mean? So,
yeah,
but
I just think for that you need a bit. It sounds a bit almost like a charm offensive kind of thing. You need a bit more, something a bit more biting. I mean, I guess Luck of the Irish was a bit more of a general song, wasn't it? But that was bizarre. That was bizarre as well to have this sort of.
Well, Luck of the Irish was more, it was written in 71, and it was more inspired by the march that they had there in wasn't it August of 71?
Yeah. Well, John Lennon gave money to the IRA, didn't he? I think that's fairly well established.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but that was at the time where he was just giving money, without probably researching things particularly.
Right.
But I think the Irish thing, I think that was important to both Lennon and McCartney because they're only 2 or 3 generations back from.
Yeah, lots of Irish, roots on both of them.
For sure.
Yeah. I was reading, research was showing that, Sunday Bloody Sunday was almost the lead-off single for the album. At least it was proposed as the lead-off single before they ended up choosing Woman as Nigger of the World, as the single. So, but just interesting on that. And
I think musically I would have chosen New York City. That would have been a great single, but I suppose that
absolutely.
That didn't quite fit. I suppose he wanted to have one that was more sort of strident activist song first. But.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yeah, very true. So let's move to February 72. I think it was in January. John and Yoko recorded their week-long stint on the Mike Douglas show. February. They're finally coming out on TV.
Yeah.
And I always dig when somebody just the host just doesn't do research, or his team doesn't do research.
I know what
Michael Douglas comes out and he sings Michelle.
Michael Douglas. That's not Michael Douglas, listeners.
No, right.
Mike Douglas.
Right,
Douglas.
right, Mike, right. Yeah, not Michael, Mike.
No,
Right,
no.
Mike Douglas, and he sits down and he's like so proud that he just like, I just want you guys to know that our host wrote this song, and he just wants to make this point so badly.
But you know what he says after that? John says, well, actually, I only wrote the middle 8.
Right.
Mike Douglas says, yeah, but that's the most difficult part, isn't it?
Right, exactly, yes.
Mike Douglas was smooth, wasn't he? Dick Cavett was a bit more natural.
Much better.
Polished and
right.
But that whole week was just amazing. I love watching that. It's the most surreal week of television.
Right. When did you first watch these?
Do
you recall?
I think they just sort of dribbled online at various times, haven't they?
Right.
Probably, I think a few years ago I watched some of it, but I think 2 or 3 years ago the whole week came online, so I think I just watched the whole thing. It's just amazing, George Carlin, Chuck Berry, calling people to say I love you, and macaroni cooking. It's just brilliant.
Right, because I think there was a DVD set put out for this.
It was. It was.
Yeah, it's not in my collection, as you can see behind me.
Right. Yeah.
Just to make the same joke twice. Sorry. Yeah.
But another interesting aspect of it too was during a Q&A, John, is publicly saying that Paul was his, is his best friend, in the male sense,
if you can't slag off your best friend, who can you slag off?
Who can you slag off? Right, exactly. So interesting, and then I love how Yoko always comes to defense saying that it's such a great song, meaning How Do You Sleep? She's always the one kind of defending the song.
Yeah, her word is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's beautiful.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful song. Yeah. Right.
It's a great song. I mean, I do love How Do You Sleep as a song. I think it's fantastic. Brilliant.
Right.
George's slide. Yeah.
Well, do you think John kind of like comped out about, going back and saying that the song is about him?
I don't know. You're asking the wrong person. I only do a podcast about him, but yeah, who knows? I don't know. I think he's just very impulsive. I mean, probably when they recorded How Do You Sleep, I mean, there is a little bit of him on the Give Me Some Truth playing on the piano to George.
Right.
George with a kind of cheeky face saying, "Oh, listen to this."
Yeah.
I think he just, I mean, we know, don't we? He was impulsive and he wanted to get stuff out, and it's this artist thing again. Don't think about it too much.
Just do it.
A great idea, do it, and then, they probably all have the same trouble, really. They haven't got anyone to say no to them, really, have they? And,
right. No.
Probably said, "Oh, don't worry, it's beautiful," and Allen Klein. I suppose Allen Klein would probably have been thinking more commercially, and I mean, it's just no one. We didn't. Ringo said something like, "Oh, lay off," didn't he?
Yeah, Ringo apparently told him, that he didn't like that one. It was a little too hard.
But I don't think there's any hardcore proof that that's accurate.
No, that's myth, I think.
Yeah.
Right, fair enough.
Right. So
yeah, he probably did go back. He probably did go back on things. I mean, we've said on Glass Onion many times, if he was alive now, he'd be firing off angry tweets and then on Twitter and then trying to delete them or trying to back.
Yeah,
he would be Twitter gold, I think, John Lennon.
He would be.
He
would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Moving ahead. Well, anything else from the Mike Douglas show you wanted to talk about? Was there anything else?
To urge people to watch it because it's amazing.
Right.
It's just a fine, surreal week of television.
Right. Actually, it says all 5 shows appear officially on home video in May of '98. So that's
okay. That's when that DVD set came out.
Well, VHS probably first, but it was commercially available in the late '90s. I remember.
Right.
lots of channels would just show the whole week. That's how I first saw it. It was just on. They would just broadcast it on VH1 or whatever. But
Right.
the whole week, which we watch these things, you see these clips and documentaries over the years, and you don't at the time you didn't really it was one show, but it ended up being a whole week, which is amazing when you think about it.
Right. And the guests they brought on too were cutting edge. It wasn't no cookie cutter shows or anything like that. They were all main topics that dealt with that time. So.
I mean, Jerry Rubin and Mike Douglas. You can't imagine that they'd have too much in common.
No.
They have an interesting debate. We did a show about 1972 on Glass Onion, and Mike Douglas's argument was always, Jerry Rubin's talking about how people are killed in America, and if you protest, the police will shoot you. And Mike Douglas's argument, of course, is, well, you're lucky you live in America where you can go on TV and say that.
Right.
It's difficult, because there's arguments on either side, but
Right.
yeah, it's very strange, seeing Bobby Seale and Mike Douglas in the same studio.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, very true, very true. Moving on to May 72, John is interviewed by Ray Connolly. Just a quick interesting quote from that. Again, this was May of 72. John went on to say, I went through a period of saying things that I thought would spur him on, meaning Paul, but I think they were misunderstood. And that's how Do You Sleep was intended. So, again, kind of interesting, him being, the honest John himself, is that, how this was intended. Did he really just want to get, Paul roused up, to start some kind of, interaction? I don't know.
Although he goes on to say, although I suppose I was a bit hard on him, that's just
Right.
how I felt when I wrote and recorded it. And there you
Right.
go.
How do you misinterpret that Melody Maker letter? I'm wondering, how does it get misinterpreted?
Right.
I don't know. This is crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
You just, yeah.
Going on, July, August, Wings are on their second tour, the Wings Over Europe tour, and this is I think where you probably first see and hear the song "Best Friend" performed, because it's not recorded, or it's not put on an album. I think it probably would have been released on the proposed double album of Red Rose Speedway, which never happened, but the first verse, tell me why do you treat me so bad? So you're the best friend a man ever had. Tell me why do you make me so mad? So you're the best friend a man ever had. There's really I haven't really ever seen any actual hard evidence that this was for John, but you see those lyrics, and I think you would have to just assume that's for John. He's writing about John.
Yeah, I haven't seen that performance actually, but is it on video or is it only audio?
No, it's just live.
Just audio.
It's just the audio. It's the audio. Yeah. So
quite heartfelt on it, do you think? What's his delivery like, would you say?
Oh, I think it's a heartfelt. I mean, it's a straight up rocker.
It's a rocker, so it's not a ballad. Yeah, again, it's kind of it's the case of Dear Friend, it's like, not a lot, you can only assume that that's what it's about, the context of the song, in a rocker version. You'd like to think it is, you wonder if Lennon obviously probably would have never heard that song, but you'd be interested, if he had heard it, what do you thought of it?
Right. Yeah. Again, just simple lyrics, nothing too complex, I mean, it's really easy to read into it, my opinion.
Yeah. 73 is where the page starts to turn, though, here in the history, in this kind of relationship. I think 73 is where things start to really kind of obviously settle down, and things start to warming up a little bit here. So I think that's and that's with them finally splitting ties with Allen Klein, which happens early in the year.
Yeah, early 73.
February, yeah. So I think from the interview we've seen with John Lennon, it's they basically, they were renewing his contract month by month, they said.
Right.
Right.
And then
at that time, yeah.
And then they were doing it like by like every 2 weeks. It was, it was crazy, month to month, and then every 2 weeks, and they finally just got cut ties.
By the end, they were doing it by the hour. It was like, what?
Probably.
If you're in a bad mood, they'd drop it, and then later that day they'd
I think the final act that Klein does for them is to put the red and the blue packages out to counteract the sale of the bootleg album of the hits that were out there, the Alpha Omega album, which was out. And I think that was Klein's last, involvement with anything with the Beatles, because those albums dropped in April of '73, and they were already probably in the can before that. So,
right.
Yeah, how brilliant are those two compilations? Just
great.
Just having those two photos, the balcony photos.
Oh, absolutely.
69, it's just perfect,
Yeah. Yeah.
Should have really been the cover of their last album, like John wanted. That really should have bookended it for real, And he talked about that in one of the letters.
I was going to say,
the Melody Maker one, I believe it was.
He doesn't let anything go, does he?
No.
He remembers it all. So there's that interview, isn't there, that surfaced April '73, apparently.
Yeah, right. The new one, yeah. Well, the one with John acknowledging that the other three would, that Paul would have been right. That one, or the other one.
No, he said the one I saw was he said, well, possibly Paul's suspicions were right.
Right.
Yes.
Right. Which that was April 1st, right?
April 1st. Interesting. Yeah. April Fool's Day. But no, I actually found the interview was there's about a 5-minute clip online, but the interview is somewhat aggressive, or at least somewhat forthright. He's challenging him. And he says, when did you decide that Klein wasn't it, or something like that? And John says, oh, well, what makes you think I thought Klein was it, or something like that?
Right. All right. So, yeah.
If you listen to Rolling Stone, he's going on and on about how great Klein is, and how, the Eastmans are so bourgeois, and Klein's a working class hero like me. And
right. Okay. So look, upon review here, it was April 6th when he made those statements. He was on, ITV with Weekend World. Can you tell me what happened with Klein? Why did you and the other two finally get rid of him? John, there are many reasons why we gave him the push, although I don't want to go into details of it. Let's say possibly Paul's suspicions were right and the time was right. So, yeah, April 6th.
But there's a video of that. And
yes.
He's a bit, I wouldn't say defensive, but he's a little bit uncertain. It's almost like he's a little bit bashful, It's almost like he doesn't really want to admit Paul was right, but he's like, no.
Right.
He doesn't, but he kind of hints at it.
Yeah, I said the interview is quite slightly aggressive with him, or he's trying to saying, "Oh, come on, mate, what did you say?" kind of thing. So it's a good interview to watch.
Yes.
Right.
But then, interestingly, he says in the same interview, he says, "Oh, the chances of us playing together," is obviously the interviewer can't let it go without asking about the Beatles getting back together. So now you're all right with Klein. Are you going to get back together? And then he says the chances of us playing are nil. Or does he say almost nil or something like that?
Almost. I think it's almost nil. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we get to.
Oh, yeah. Practically nil. With or without the present situation, the chances are practically nil. Although I hate to say definitely to anything, because every time I change my mind.
Oh, well, okay. Yeah. Honest. Yeah. Because another time he said it's because at various times they weren't able to get into America, so they wouldn't be able to all meet. There were various stories. Yeah. So, but then a few months later, again, the tune has changed a little bit, hasn't it? So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We'll get to that in a few minutes. But in April of '73, now 2 days later, Andy, we get a response from Paul.
Right. So Paul, not even knowing that John said this, but knew that Klein was out. Paul says, quote, "With Klein there, the road was closed against the four of us ever working together. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the road is open again. I saw Klein as a sharp operator who could only do harm with the Beatles. The others disagreed. Now they have come around to my way of thinking. There's no reason why we should all not work together again now. Klein was one of my main worries." Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on and on, but that's, the meat and potatoes of the quote. which is attributed to, credited in Keith Medman's other book, Tuesday, April 3rd, but I'm not sure if Lennon's saying this on the 6th, the dates probably don't jive, but it was an interview that he did in his house with Murray Davis, so a journalist. I'm not sure who he was with. Anthony, maybe you know.
I don't know, actually.
But maybe it was for the NME. I'm not sure. But interesting that he knows that Klein's out of the way, out of the picture, and they're kind of really while Wings is really starting to get their footing. Really, they're shifting around, and he's saying, "Well, yeah, now Klein's gone, we can get together."
Right.
Yeah, I think what's really holding them back was just what would have been the reaction of the public. I think they just would have gone nuts for it. I think that was one of the things, because they mentioned, and sorry to backtrack, but they mentioned about Bangladesh, don't they, in those letters in '71. Paul said he didn't want all the big hullabaloo of the Beatles getting back together. John didn't do it because Yoko wasn't invited. So. It's interesting that if you look at it in the '70s, they're all kind of floating around in 2s and 3s.
Right.
They all play on each other's stuff. Obviously, John and Paul, apart from Two Snore, never played together. But it's interesting, they're all kind of circling around almost, but you never quite get the four of them togetger. I think just the pressure would have been too much.
Yeah. Well, Paul was recording with Ringo when he had said that, when he made that comment.
Yeah, 6 o'clock, wasn't it, that song?
Yeah, he was. Yeah, so he would have known. He probably would have known from working with Ringo, that they were going to close the book on Allen Klein.
Oh, right. Yeah, so many nearlies, aren't there, in the '70s?
So many,
yeah. 2s and 3s.
And let's get to one of those nearlies. November '73, Elliot Mintz. You can find this interview on YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about that, Anthony.
First of all, John Lennon's flares, his flared trousers are fantastic. That's one good thing. He's very calm, yeah. I mean, I suppose, Mike, if I could just talk about the Lost Weekend for a second.
Yeah.
I think there's a general idea that someone can either be drinking and taking a lot of drugs or very productive, and that there's no way you could be both of those things.
Right.
I think John Lennon had an ability, probably the other Beatles did, to be kind of on a binge, whether it's drinking or Coke or whatever, but then kind of straighten himself out. So in this interview, he seems very calm. They're strolling on the beach, aren't they? And
right.
He's the kind of the lucid John Lennon, the calm John Lennon, the one with the sort of, he was always charismatic, whether he's being catty, childish, calm. He's always charismatic. And I think the quote was, Elliot says, "Will the Beatles get together?" And he says, "It's quite possible."
Quite possible, right.
Gone from nil to quite possible in a few months.
Right. And, then another quote was, "The wounds are healed," so I mean, that tells me that it's, it's definitely a possibility. Absolutely.
Yeah, but he does say also, which is quite honest, he says, I go on instinct. So
right.
If the idea hit me, I might call them and say, let's get together.
Right. Yeah. So, I think the quote was, he's like, he didn't want to initiate it in a way. You know what I mean?
That could be the other thing, because maybe it's really John and Paul. I think George kind of gets seen as a bit sort of anti-Beatles, doesn't he, from a certain point?
Yeah.
George and Ringo would have been into it. I think John and Paul was always a sticking point, and maybe it was a case of, you don't want to be the one to make the first move. It's almost like I don't know, a couple who've split up and then they're on the verge of getting back together, but neither of them wants to be the one to say, "Oh, shall we do it?"
Right.
I think there's a lot of that going on.
I guess I can understand the part where he says that it's on instinct, because in a way, I don't think he would have wanted to think about it too much, because then, that brings back, when you think about it, you plan it, then the nerves start sinking in. So, oh my God, are we going to live up to the hype?
Right.
All of this. Yeah, it's really interesting how he talks about it in that interview.
Yeah.
Do you know if you have a date for that original interview on the beach? Is there a date attributed to that when it was broadcast?
Not an exact date. I've just got November here.
Yeah. So according to our text here, November 3rd, and I don't know if it's before that, but he talks about says John announces that he talks to at least one of the other ex-Beatles every 2 weeks. I've talked to Ringo a lot because he just moved into my house in Ascot, which is nice because I always have a bedroom there. I haven't talked to Paul since he did his last tour with Wings, but I heard Red Rose Speedway and it was all right.
Hmm.
So, and that's November. So I don't know if the Elliot Mintz interview was probably after that, because I mean it was all Mind Games promotional time and
Right.
Yeah.
And this was like this just the beginning of the Lost Weekend, right?
right, Anthony.
For the most part.
Yeah, first few months. And
Yeah.
it was actually with the Lost Weekend. Obviously, they probably had a few crazy nights in LA, but actually the famous stuff, the 2 Troubadour incidents and the
Right.
Snore and all that, is actually beginning of '74.
Right. So we'll definitely get into that on part 3 of this this conversation.
I think he just sort of veered between calm and conciliatory, and then sort of angry.
And 73, and I know, Tom, you guys have talked about this on Talk More Talk. I mean, that year is probably one of the most rich and colorful years for all the solo ex-Beatles.
Absolutely.
What was going on in their lives, how they kind of intertwined, and nearly all of them connected, but not so, but just they were all opening around the same time. You had them huge popularity again with the Red and the Blue albums coming out again. All 4 of them were commercially doing well. So it really, I think I forget how it went on your show, but I think pretty much everybody picked 73 as the best playing of both Beatles years.
Right. I mean, you're looking at 5 albums. I believe 3 of those go to number 1. You're looking at, a standalone single with Live and Let Die. That goes to number 2. 3 singles go to number 1 with My Love, Give Me Peace, Give Me Love, and I think You're 16.
And Photograph.
Photograph. Yeah. One of those I think was 74, if I remember correctly. So I would have to go back and.
But then there's Poor John at the end, and I think he cracks Mind Games maybe with the top 10 as a single.
Right.
I think. Yeah. So he really is. George performed better than him. I mean, all 3 Beatles did better commercially than John in 73. Not that John didn't do well, but I mean, after some time in New York City, it was a better showing. But the fact that the other 3 outperformed him better in that year I'm sure, was very humbling for him.
It's interesting for the fans, though, isn't it, to actually have 4? Did you say 5 albums or what?
It was 5 albums because then we had Band on the Run in December of 73.
And what was the other one for Paul?
Red Rose Speedway.
Oh, okay. So 5 solo albums plus the Red and the Blue.
Yeah.
See their point that the fans are getting a lot more, because if they'd been together, they probably would have just made 1 album, wouldn't they?
Right.
Maybe.
Absolutely. Right.
So yeah, fans are getting value for money.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to think that 1 or 2 of them still would have put out a solo album as well, because again, you've got all this material, it needs to get out. Recording sessions back then weren't taking as long as they do today. You can record an album in 3-4 months back then still, because of how talented these artists were back then, I think. But you would also have to think then, okay, maybe they do a mini tour, in 73 if they did get back together, So I mean,
it's nice to see those moments when the ice thaws with what they went through. This interview that Antony mentions with Elliot Mintz, in November of 73. You could see that footage of George looking at himself. I think it's probably 74 when he sees himself performing, singing This Boy. When you see those moments when the ice starts to thaw and they're okay, those are the moments that, as fans, we like, because it's like, okay, with all that crap and BS when it's 70, 71, things 70, but then by 73, 74, as things start to thaw a little bit, and you see they look back at what they did with happiness, which all you can ask for.
Yeah, time is a healer.
Yeah, that's true.
Of course, 3 or 4 years is a long time, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
We talked on the show about Beatle years, one year for them is about 5 years for everybody else.
That's a great point, Andy. One year in the Beatles' career it could be, right, you said 5 more for the average person.
I don't know if I made it up or it was one of my guests. I honestly can't remember. But I love it. Anyway, yeah. So 3 or 4 years of their lives, like, I don't know, a decade. Anybody else?
Well, I mean, Yeah, the George line, I always loved the George line is that, that the Beatles gave their fans their nervous systems, it's just, great line, you know.
Brilliant.
Yeah, 1 year probably equals 5 years for
Yeah,
them.
well, yeah, no, they gave us their money and everything, but the Beatles gave them their nervous systems, which was much
there you
tougher to
go.
give. Yeah.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Were there any other years where they all brought out solo albums in the same year? There can't have been too many.
I think
Say again?
73. Was there any other year that they actually all had solo albums in the same year?
70, obviously, because they all brought out their first albums, didn't they?
Yeah,
1970.
70, 70, and then 73.
73.
Not 74 because we had, was it 75? Venus and Mars, rock and roll. We had 33 and the third. Ringo Vertigo year, I think, was 76.
Yeah,
So
Ringo had his Blast from the Past album.
Yeah, right. So greatest hits. So that I don't think that would count, but
right.
But if you want to count a greatest hits, then yeah, you would have had the 75 as well.
Oh yeah. No, I think just to have a new album by all of them with fresh material.
70,
Right.
70 and 73. That's it.
73, yeah. That's it.
Yeah. So December 73, Band on the Run is released, and there's a track on there called Let Me Roll It.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot of people, or I've read that people think that song is is a homage to Lennon, but in the production sense. If you listen to the song, like the kind of like it pays homage to the Wall of Sound, Phil Spector type thing. You get the echo effect on the vocal, like John had a few of those effects on, like Instant Karma, for instance. Paul has since dismissed this, and then he's just said, yeah, I mean, there might be some similarities, but the song is more or less just, hey, let's roll a joint.
Let me roll it. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Let me roll it. And I always wanted to just have. I'm fine with it. I mean, if the song is a pot song, I'm fine with that. However, what does he say before Let Me Roll It? My heart is like a wheel. So I've always kind of like dismissed it that is a pot song, but just because of how the lyrics roll out,
I think just the general thing, let me roll it to you. It's almost like saying, here's my olive branch,
Yeah.
Right.
Whether or not he did it consciously, I think it's one of his my favorite songs of Paul McCartney's, actually. And it's actually been in his live set
Forever.
Maybe not
Forever.
Yeah.
Forever. Too long.
Does it? Right. Been there the whole time. But very interestingly, is it? Oh, gee, what's the John Lennon song that sounds like this?
Beef
jerky.
Jerky. Is that Mind Games or Walls and Bridges?
Walls and Bridges.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
it's got
interesting.
that same little riff. Yeah.
So I think probably subconsciously they were talking to each other,
Yeah, Lennon's actually only instrumental song that he released during his lifetime.
Well, interesting. And there was some school of thought. I don't know where I got this from. I can't remember that I Don't Want to Face It was we're going forward to 1980 here, but I Don't Want to Face It was a response to Coming Up. So he's saying coming up like a flower, we can do this, and then he's saying I don't want to face it. But I don't know if you came up with that, but you could read almost anything, couldn't you?
Oh yeah, you could play those mind games with any of those. A lot of these songs.
One thing I didn't get to actually was I'm sure you guys know that channel Breathless. We talked about it before, haven't we?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I didn't get back. I was half thinking of watching that documentary again in preparation for this, but it's so long.
Oh, it's so long. Yeah.
Right.
Isn't it? I mean,
you need to have a block of days where you've got nothing to do and you watch that.
But he changes the name. I think it's now called Understanding Lennon and McCartney. But
yeah, I believe so.
And isn't it a 5-part thing, Tom, or something? Whatever.
The Paul McCartney standalone, I think, was 5.
The Lennon-McCartney one was just the one, right?
No, I think it's 4. I think it's 5. Yeah, 4 or 5.
I thought it was too.
Yeah, because
I can't positively say how many episodes that one was. I just think it was the flat out McCartney one. I think was 5 episodes.
But the other one's definitely at least 4 because it's Lennon-McCartney together apart, the 70s, and then one was called Scotland to New York. So I think it's 4, yeah, possibly even 5. I mean, those are epic. Just to I'm sure we'd all recommend those, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
He's a very talented YouTuber, that Breathless fella, or
Yeah,
lady. I don't know.
I did contact him actually, and he
I did too.
politely said he wasn't doing interviews, but yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I thanked
Yeah,
him.
listen, as soon as the first episode came out of the McCartney one, I contacted him as well, and he said, "Yeah, I'm not big on interviews, so be it. It's fine."
Joe Gooden as well.
Just keep making them, Breathless.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. I just told him, carry on with the video. Well, he's making some other ones because he's put a few trailers out, hasn't he? There's one called John Lennon Middle Class Hero, which is quite funny.
Yeah.
And
Didn't see that yet.
The one on Paul was good, though, wasn't it? That 5-part.
Oh, I thought it was really good. Yeah, I mean, there was a few, few of the timelines didn't mesh, but all in all, I mean, there's some clips on there that throughout the whole 5-part series that I'd never seen before, and I was really fascinated by a lot of what he found and added to that series. So absolutely, good on him for that.
Puts echo on everything, which might have not worked, but it kind of works, doesn't it?
Yeah, I noticed that too. Yeah,
it's a little more eerie or somehow, because of the echo. But I just thought it worked brilliantly. So good on Breathless 345.
Right. We'll end with this, just to give like a little bit of a preview for part 3 for this, because this should be a 3-part series here. But throughout 73, Paul is interviewed for Rolling Stone. That interview was released in January of 74. So we'll probably pick up with that in part 3. The Shooting a Snore.
lost all the lost weekends.
Lost Weekend, the Saturday Night Live possibility. The one photo that pops up of Paul and John outside. Was that on the patio or something like that?
And out, yeah. And then the possibility of maybe going to New Orleans to work on Venus and Mars, because John and May were still together, and that's kind of that fateful moment where, May entered and John went back to Yoko, and that was it. But and then the one final face-to-face meeting, which, Antony, maybe you can tell us the exact date. I want to say is April of 76. Do we know?
We think it's probably April, but I'm not sure of the exact date. I think both their fathers had died, I think.
Right.
Well, I might be thinking of that brilliant Two of Us.
Two of Us. Yeah. Such a good movie. Good movie.
I don't care about inaccuracies.
It's inaccurate. It's just such a good film.
It's just got the spirit of it, and those guys did a great job.
Oh my God, it was great. They were both great. That was Jared Harris played Lennon, and I forget what's his name.
Aidan Quinn.
Aidan Quinn did McCartney. Yeah.
Did McCartney with an Irish accent, basically. But
yes.
I just thought it was great. Yeah, but no, the real meeting. Yeah, I don't know. I think went Yoko and Linda there for the real meeting. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. I think that's right.
As far as I remember and have read.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, to get into. You sure it's going to be a 3-parter?
I think we can end.
We can stretch it. We can stretch it to 3.
Yeah. I mean, if part 2 needs to be 2.5 hours, 2-3 hours, so be it.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But Andy, tell people how they can find your shows. Three shows.
Yeah, so obviously still the main one at the moment is Glass Onion on John Lennon. They're all of them are in all the usual places, but I'll just give the Twitter actually, because Twitter seems to be a good one for traffic. Yeah. So that's Onion Lennon, and then Film Gold. That's Film Gold at Film Gold 75, and then Life and Life Only is at Life Only 75.
Okay.
Just holding it together with 3 podcasts, but.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how's your schedule? Like you said, the movie one is once a month, right? And then the life one, I mean, is that again once a month as well? I mean, how many episodes have you got out with that one?
with that one, I think I've only got 6 at the moment, but I only started in January. Basically, Glass Onion, I try and keep every 2 weeks. And
Okay.
I've got loads in the can, so I'm good for that for a while. The film one is every month. It won't be any more frequent. And then the life one, what it is that I've got lots of essays and blog posts, so I'm going to be a lot of reading those out. So I've already got a ton of material already. So
Gotcha.
that will be more frequent. And I said in a few months, maybe next time we meet, that one might have sort of taken over, but we'll see how Glass Onion goes.
And can you give your fans of your Glass Onion fans kind of like a little tidbit of what they can expect in the future,
Sure.
guest wise, maybe?
Yeah, well, the ones I've already got recorded. Let's think. I did. Are we allowed to mention Paul or nothing? Yeah, we are, aren't we? Yeah. Your friend Sam Wiles. He and I did a double swap cast. We did rock and roll and Shobber.
Right.
And he's already put that out. But I'll put out a version of that. And then I was interviewed by one of the listeners, who's a journalist, Spencer. We talked a lot about Albert Goldman again. And
Spencer Lee, Anthony?
No, Spencer Cox. His name is no. He's a young fellow who's a listener of mine. We had a good chat, and then the two that I'm really excited to getting out. Aaron Torkelson Weber, as we said, that'll probably be a 2-parter because we talked for a long time about history and propaganda, and then we got to some Beatles books, and then a guy called Alan Parry, who's from Liverpool, a therapist and a musician, so he was perfect for my podcast because the podcast is kind of psychology, looking at psychology. So so there's tons already in the can, so I'll be good for a few more months anyway.
Ooh. So you're excited about those two, not necessarily the one with Sam. We get it. We understand. Don't worry.
Well, someone was on his show recently. A guy does Under the Covers, and I listened to a bit of it, and he said, it's great to be on 2 legs. Hi, Tom and Andy. I think you and Sam have an extremely good-natured rivalry, right? Well, not even a rivalry, right?
Friendly.
Friendly, right? Okay.
Yeah.
It's very much like it's like a very much Lennon and McCartney 70s relationship.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes conciliatory, sometimes not.
Yes. Yeah. We might be in that 1971-ish, 2-ish period right now. I don't know.
Right. Some angry letters.
Yeah.
Angry emails.
I'm writing them, Sam. I'm writing them. I'm coming for you.
Well, I've got no competition in the John Lennon. I mean, I know you do solo Beatles, Tom, but
right. But exactly, you are luckily alone in your John Lennon podcasting world, which again is pretty cool. To be able to say that you're the only one, really.
And I've got to say, there's a gaping hole for a George Harrison podcast.
Oh, it's
someone out there.
It's a massive hole.
Yeah, I mean, the Ringo podcast, not sure, but
well, listen, no, I think a George one would be fascinating too, because he had so many other interests, just not music, with the gardening and the racing, and the spirituality, I mean, just so many different aspects of George that could really, you could definitely see you do like a 5, 6, 7 years worth of podcasts on George.
More I read about him, actually, he gets more John-like in that he had who was the lady? Was it Chris? A lady from the fan club stayed at Friar Park in the 70s. Do you know about that? It was in the drugs book, The Riding So High. And she said something like there were 3 Georges. There was spiritual George, chilled out George, and angry whiskey cocaine George. Stayed at Friar Park for a few months, I think it was. So he was kind of John-like. That's why I always thought George was more like John's baby brother in a funny way. But
yeah, and he was he was a very honest person as well. In the sense that John was honest too, but I just don't think he contradicted himself as much as John did. Maybe.
No, pretty much when George made a decision or a stance, he pretty much kept to it.
Right.
Yeah, I feel like in the anthology, George was dying to tell the truth, but he just couldn't be bothered because in the anthology, he's always kind of just slightly stepping away, and he's thinking, well, Paul's going to have the limelight.
Yeah, Phil, I don't know. I don't remember. Let's ask Paul. He can tell you about it. Over to Paul.
album was Golden Slumbers. Was that Abbey Road, Let It Be? I don't know.
Yeah.
Oh, good stuff. Andy, what's going on with you, buddy?
Not much, man. Just monitoring and managing the YouTube portion of Two Legs, which is kind of more my thing. Tom does the audio, monitors the audio stuff on Podbean, and I kind of monitor our YouTube channel, and which is over 500 subscribers now. So thank you everybody who have liked and subscribed to that. Our shows drop weekly on Saturday mornings, 10 a.m. Eastern, our pre-recorded ones. And of course, we have our Ranking the Tracks, which I'll let Tom kind of tell us about.
Yeah, Ranking the Tracks has been great. Great series for us. I've been enjoying doing that every week. We had a little mishap last week, but we're going to be back on track on the 17th. So by the time you hear this, we'll have already done the Ranking the Tracks, which was the non-80s or the 80s non-album tracks.
Right,
so all the B-sides and non-album singles, your Once Upon a Times.
Once upon a long ago.
Once upon a long ago. You're back on the feet, Flying to My Home, Spies Like Us, We All Stand Together, stuff like that. And Right Away, I'll Give You a Ring, all that stuff. We're going to be ranking those, and then we're going to get into the 90s with Off the Ground. So looking forward to that. So thank you everybody for joining us live, and those are the live editions. I'm having a great time doing live, and Andy, I'd love to see you do a live YouTube thing maybe one day on your show.
Me, yeah.
What do you think about that?
I don't know. I think I'd be nervous about that.
All the nerves go away.
I like the fact that I can edit it and just make everything.
Right.
Yes.
I'm not sure if
Do it on it. Just do it on instinct.
Yeah.
Like John Lennon. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, maybe in the future. But we're having a great time with that. We got a bunch of great shows planned out, a bunch of great guests planned out. So make sure you find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Two Legs Podcast. You can email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, like Andy said, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We really appreciate all of you guys subscribing. You can see our wonderful faces, and especially if it's a show on collecting things. Those are the kind of shows you're going to want to watch on YouTube, so you can see what we're showing and whatnot. And we really appreciate all you guys hanging out with us. So for Antony, for Andy, I'm Tom, and as always, everybody out there, have a great day and a beautiful night. Take care.
Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, hosted by Tom Hunyadi and Andy Nichols, with musical contributions by Dylan